When you're first starting out, you're just looking for where to go and what to avoid. And to know that, you have to understand the river. Let's talk about river reading. Rivers are made of water, rocks, trees, and sometimes man-made obstacles that are put there or fall in. The water always takes the shortest path downhill. Fueled by gravity, it tries to flow in a straight line where it's fastest. Faster water is caused by steeper gradient as gravity pulls it downhill. The faster and more powerful the water becomes, the more sediment it can carry. It cuts and moves bigger boulders, creating more complicated rapids. It causes vertical erosion, creating deeper gorges and canyons. As the gradient levels out and the river calms down, the erosion on the outside of the river bends continue, but the water can't cut and move the bigger rocks the same way. The sediment drops out of the water more easily and gathers on the inside of the river bends. This causes the riverbanks to change and meander. When you start to read Whitewater, you start in the slower meandering streams and gradually work your way up to the faster, steeper, tighter sections where the same features can become more subtle, varied, and harder to recognize. When you're first starting out, it's best to keep things simple because you're still learning your environment, getting to know the river. And to understand what's happening on a macro scale, it's often useful to look at a micro scale. Rocks and water work the same on both. That's why I always recommend playing in a stream bed or creek with a foam boater or sticks. There's no better way to learn river reading than to imagine yourself on a micro scale and play with the features you find without any consequence. And if you're paddling a new run and want to know what it may look like or what style rapids you'll find, one clue you can find are the stream beds and ditches close by. Each river's geology, gradient, and frequency of runnability shape the rapids and the pace of the river proportionately. Let's look at some of the common dangers you'll find in Whitewater. Most hazards are natural. Trees fall into the river from erosion, wind, and disease. Because of the erosion on the outside of a river bend, that's one of the most common places to find fallen trees. When a tree just hangs over the surface of the water, we call it a sweeper. But sometimes trees fall completely into the riverbed and flood events can move them around. We call these strainers because they tend to strain out anything that floats in the river, and that can include paddlers and kayaks. Getting stuck in a strainer can easily be life-threatening. Strainers are dangerous. One of the worst kinds of strainers you'll find are often whole root balls. But just because a tree is in the water doesn't make it inherently dangerous. And like all things in kayaking, it's better to assume it's a risk until you learn enough to tell the innocuous tree apart from a deadly one. Rivers also have rocks, especially whitewater rivers. You can predict a lot about a river, especially if you understand the geology. When hard, erosion-resistant rock is mixed with softer layers of rocks, like limestone and sandstone in this instance, it can form waterfalls because the softer rock layers become weathered away and leave the harder shelves behind. But the rapids will also be shaped by the large chunks of those shelves that break off into the river. Bedrock, like granite, can create long, fun slides. As the water weathers the rocks, you can get different river features that can become significant hazards if they're on your line. Where the river weathers away the rock on the sides, but the rock is hard enough or strong enough to stay in place, you'll find overhangs. Overhanging rocks aren't inherently a problem, but when they get deep and the water flows against them, they can be a hazard. When those overhangs face upstream, they become undercuts. You can tell if a rock is undercut by the pillow on the upstream side. If there's no pillow and the water just seems to disappear and you don't see it going anywhere, chances are the rock is undercut. If you see a good pillow on the rock, chances are it's safe. Undercuts are dangerous because the force of the river can pin a paddler or equipment under the surface against the rock. Rock piles against undercuts and rock piles in general can make sieves. A sieve is like a strainer formed out of rocks. Think of them as undercuts from every side, often ending in a space that a paddler and equipment or logs can't fit through. They allow things to flow in, but there's not enough room for them to flow out. Water can also become acidic when mixed with carbon dioxide near the surface, and when it eats away rock like limestone and other similar rocks, it creates karst, a distinct terrain filled with caves and potholes. Karst can form along a riverbed, creating siphons where the river disappears underground. In some areas, entire rivers disappear underground for short or even long distances. The good news is that rock dangers are normally found on expert sections and not on the beginner sections that you'll find when you're learning. Most easier paddles and mellower streams don't actually have those kinds of hazards, but some actually do. Typically, the primary river dangers a beginner will have to recognize and face are trees and strainers. But the worst obstacles you'll find on any river are usually man-made. I've seen rusted culverts, barbed wire cattle fences, and even old cars and refrigerators in the river, and it's not uncommon to find dams. But low-head dams, low-water bridges, and road crossings can come without warning and pose a significant threat.
Alright, so here's an example of a hole you don't want to mess with. It looks really benign, but these low-head dams are actually quite often fatal. The problem is they're perfect shape, really quite dangerous. And so that is something you want to avoid because all that water goes straight down evenly, back up, and recirculates. And so lots of people drown in these every year. It's ridiculous that we make these low-head dams so perfectly shaped.
Especially when it floods. The hydraulics formed as water flows over such an even surface can create drowning machines. These need to be portaged regardless of skill level. And while it's important to learn how to recognize all those hazards, it's equally important to focus on a more positive mindset while river reading. Look for where you want to go. Don't focus or fixate on the dangers. After all, where you're looking is usually where you'll go. So how do we figure out where to go? Usually by scouting the rapid from either in your boat or on the bank. The route that you're looking for that goes through the rapid is called your line. As a beginner, you're just looking for an open path, usually the deepest water moving downstream. It's darker in color, smoother, and faster than all the other water. Shallow water appears splashy, often indicated by riffles and a sparkly appearance downstream. When there are shallow spots and deeper paths, it forms tongues. Tongues are the most easily recognizable river feature by the appearance of a downstream V. These are caused by obstacles or relatively shallow water on either side of the deeper moving water in the tongue. As the fast water from the tongue flows over obstacles in the riverbed and impacts pulled up slower water downstream, it creates standing waves. Once the standing waves can splash over the deck of your kayak, old school kayakers call them haystacks. But that term is losing popularity and most people just call them waves. If you can't easily see a downstream V, you can often spot a tongue by just looking for the taller waves. The taller waves are always going to be where the deeper water is on a river. Like in the ocean, river waves can be really steep and crash over with the gradient of the riverbed. Like being frozen in time, a standing but crashed wave creates a recirculating feature called a hole or a stopper. Holes can be a lot of fun for intermediate paddlers and experts, but for beginners they can be scary for the quick flips and unintentional surfs they provide. Obstacles on the riverbank and irregular bends in the river can create waves or holes that cross the river at an angle. These are called diagonals, and often they act as one side of a tongue. The same layered rock formations that make waterfalls can create ledges and shoals on easier rivers. Large bedrock riverbeds can create slides, and slides can be steep like waterfalls or easy shallow angled fun. An eddy is a calm spot away from the main current typically found on the riverbank. They can also be found on the inside of a river bend or behind the rocks or other river obstacles. Eddies themselves are usually a calm, peaceful place to talk, rest, and regroup. It's where the eddies and moving water come together that can cause a beginner problems. This is an eddy line. Most beginners tend to flip while crossing between the slower and faster moving water like you find on an eddy line. The sudden change in momentum is not stable and requires edge control. And while they aren't typically dangerous river features, Eddy lines are where you'll find whirlpools and boils. Whirlpools are typically a temporary feature that forms where the different currents cross. Boils form where the water can finally come back to the surface. Boils can feel unstable to a beginner and require specialized techniques to paddle through. As you gain experience and step up to harder and harder rivers, these features don't really change, but they do become more pronounced, more subtle, and more complex. As a beginner, you'll focus on finding deep tongues and catching and leaving eddies. You're still surviving the basic forces of the river and learning that it can be fun. As an intermediate paddler, you'll find that some obstacles are no longer avoidable. You'll have to deal with rocks in a different way, by boofing and landing flat. Your search for tongues and eddies will have to expand to boofs, eddies, or tongues. I call it a safe bet. But a boof is any time you can find something to ramp off of and land flat. That's what a boof is. So it can be a rock, a ledge, a fold of water that lets your boat get high above all the other water and splashes on the river. It's not just more fun, but it's a good way to keep your boat on top. A tongue is anywhere you'll see the downstream V's moving downstream where that deep water is working its way through the rapid. You can follow those tongues, linking them from tongue to tongue to tongue. Those are a safe route and a safe bet. And if you can't find a good boof or a good tongue, chances are you need an eddy. So you always want to have an eddy in mind where you can get out if you need to. Tongues will start to crisscross, creating folds, and you'll have to learn to stay on top of the flow. You'll face deeper ledges, bigger holes, and faster, more continuous and varied lines. As an advanced or expert paddler, your ability to read the river becomes more fine-tuned, but so do the features you'll face. Ledges and holes may become waterfalls. Waterfalls are drops and ledges that are taller than your boat is long. Most people draw that line around 8 feet. Tongues may become extremely wide and powerful, or narrow and hard to read. Eddies may have eddies of their own, and eddy lines may turn into large whirlpools. Boofs may become more steep, more tall, and more tricky. And you'll learn that waves can come in many forms, and many sizes. Surging waves that pick up and crash as they form. Offset waves, where the waves never seem to line up. Wedging waves that refract off the riverbank and then collide into bigger waves. More advanced rivers come with more complexity, more danger, and more power, and still involve recognizing potential obstacles and hazards. But at its core, it's still just looking for a boof, an eddy, or a tongue. And if you can find the next one, you can find the line. Just make sure you can always keep an eddy in mind and a backup where you can get out safely. At the end of the day, good river reading is all about finding outflow. Outflow is just where the water exits the rapid, sometimes into a pool or sometimes into the next rapid. You can recognize it by looking for the tongue leaving. It's the long trail of Whitewater on its way out. You'll never have to go further in the sport than you want, and most paddlers never move beyond Class 3, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But that doesn't mean you can't read the river like an expert. If you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe. I know it's crazy to always have to ask for subscribers and likes. It's not for my ego, I promise. It really just helps me keep the channel going. Without your support, YouTube doesn't think it's special. And it also affects the type of opportunities I get down the road and the ways that I can get paid down the road. So please hit that subscribe button just to support. There's also another way you can support. Go to my website and sign up for my email list, and then you'll be one of the first to know when I'm doing an instructional opportunity near you. And now that includes virtual coaching. So I can do a virtual video review with you or virtual consultations as well. So make sure you go to my website and check that out at avoidant-style.com. I'll see you on the river.